1 minute later.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 60. God, at 60 episodes, what are we doing with our lives as we speak?
Who knows?
Yeah, who knows, right? And welcome, to episode 60. And we are finally covering the final pillar of extreme metal, Grindcore. We're talking the top 10 Grindcore albums. Of course, myself, Ricky, and Raphael are here. Yeah, not everybody's here yet. Pixie couldn't make it, Hannah's busy, Archer's busy. We do have a new host coming eventually, and other things ahead. And Ricky, you done fucked up.
Yeah, I know. Because of the headphones. I forgot to switch my freaking AirPods, but nah, I'll probably do that next time.
If you even remember.
Yeah, if I remember. Yes,
I remember. You remember? Because I remember.
I remember the glory.
Okay, settle down, Phil Collins. Don't summon Kamikaze in here.
I can feel it coming in the air tonight. Oh no.
Or better yet, Mike Tyson will show up and knock you the fuck out.
And I've been waiting for this moment all my life.
One more time, guys. Oh Lord! Boom! Fucking deck Zach Galifianakis in the fucking face.
Shut up!
Anyways. So in the past, we've talked thrash, black metal, death metal, and doom metal. Now we are finally talking about the fifth and final extreme metal genre on this show, and that's grind. So for those uneducated people out there, people wonder, what the hell is grindcore? Basically, you take hardcore punk, crust punk, noise music, industrial music, thrash metal, extreme metal, and death metal, blend it all into a deranged blender, and out pops grindcore.
I mean, it's even in the name, grind. You need to grind at the bottom of the barrel.
Like this.
Yeah, it's literally like the last. You gotta grind it there. Find this disgusting,
putrid pile of shit.
Yet you nurture it. It's beautiful. It's fucking beautiful.
You put the core. You put a core in it and plug it out.
Yeah, and also on top of all of that, when you look at the lyrical themes of a lot of these bands, very political.
Yeah,
they usually grindcore gets it from the punk scene, which you can get the dots there, but the majority of early grindcore bands, they were really political. Not so much now. There are a couple of bands that are still kind of political, but
nowadays they get into more deranged storytelling.
Yeah.
So, and we might talk about some of those later on, but yeah, and it's like you look at the political lyrics, they're more often than not liberal leaning, which it's like, if it's liberal or fascist, I stay away from that stuff because it's like, fuck both of those sides. But what I do like about with grindcore though is just how extreme the music can get, to the point where you could make the argument it's out of all 5 extreme metal genres the most extreme, mostly in the speed, I would say, is the reason why. But I still think death metal is the most extreme out of them all, based on a musical standpoint. But in terms of speed and just the overall bizarre, strange nature, grind is the most extreme when it comes to speed, because they play mega fucking fast. And plus, it was with grind and early black metal that we got the blast beat introduced into extreme music. But now, of course, when it does come to grindcore, as important as it is, I will argue, out of all the extreme metal genre scenes, it's the smallest, because there's not that many grind bands out there compared to thrash, black metal, death metal, and even doom. Like, it's not as big, but it's more scattered across the world. Like, you got some bands here in the States, you got some bands from Canada, England, Sweden, Japan especially. You know, it just scatters all across the world.
And I think the problem with grindcore, that's not the many grindcore bands, because usually they either go the death metal route, the purely death metal, or sometimes
they go strictly punk.
Yep, or they go right in the middle, which is porno grind, which
gore grind.
Try going to that rabbit hole without going. You think yourself, what the fuck am I listening to? You're gonna question your own. You're gonna question your own sanity, and then you're gonna be like, "Am I going to hell for this?"
Well, not just go to hell. You'll be like, "Is this a part of my fucking life now?"
The grind is real.
Yeah. But yeah, and as far as like grindcore, as far as like what are there sub genres of grind? Yeah, there are. The big ones, the two big ones being death grind and gore grind, which both are very similar. They're both essentially death metal and grindcore together, but in two different ways. Death grind, with death grind, it's way less punky and more death metal oriented. Whereas gore grind, yeah, it's death metal and grindcore, but it's a little more punky on that end of the scale. So, and then of course porno grind, you got cyber grind, you got noise grind,
black and death grind,
or blackened grindcore in general. I mean, hell, let's not forget, actually early Rotting Christ was blackened grind. They were pretty grindy in like their demo days before their first album. They were pretty grindcore, so yeah, it's out there. It is definitely out there.
Yeah.
But now let's get to honorable mentions. Now, I know Ricky doesn't have any honorable mentions.
I don't have honorable mentions, but I want to mention two bands in particularly that are kind of in the same story to what we're going to talk about later. First one's Bolt Thrower. A lot of people in the past have said Bolt Thrower should be in the top grindcore bands. I'm going to say it right now. Bolt Thrower, influences of the genre, they're not grindcore. They're strictly death metal. Yeah, the demos and EPs,
and their first album was grind elements, but still just... And also, I would argue the big reason why Bolt Thrower wouldn't belong is because they were more riff-based than everybody else.
And not the scream was completely different than what grind.
Way lower in the register early on.
Yeah,
and if Josh Burnett, he's probably gonna whoop all of our asses. He's that grind. Voltor is death, man. What the fuck is wrong with you people?
Yeah, and the second band that I want to mention, which I doubt we are gonna have in the top 10, Anacond.
Yeah.
If you know the history of Anacond, you know they're one of those bands that
very controversial bands.
Very controversial.
Well, particularly Seth Putnam.
Even though they're important to the genre, I mean, the development of grindcore and the States, noise grind. I usually don't listen to them because of Seth, but I can respect what they did for the genre. But him as a person, I'm like, I respect
people. It's like people have different opinions about Seth Putnam. You got some people who hated his guts, and then you got some people who loved him. You know, and it's like Seth Putnam. It's like a lot of good chunk of his friends from back in the day, like who the hell was it? The drummer for Municipal Waste. I'm trying to remember his name.
Was it Tim?
No, that was the drummer for Anacond. Let me go to Municipal Waste real quick, because he also played drums in a band that I am going to be talking about in just a little bit. Who the fuck was the drummer? David Whitty. how could I forget? Even he said, like, Seth is a good guy, was a good guy, and that all his controversial things he would say he only did just to evoke reactions out of people. It wasn't like... People always wanted to claim that Seth was a racist, but in reality, he wasn't. He just did that shit just to... He just did that shit to just piss people
attention.
off.
And then there's a saying, the more they hate, the better.
Yeah, so like I said, I mean, I respect Seth for what he did for the genre.
I may not like him as much as of a person, and also, yeah, his whole feud with Chris Barnes was very childish.
Yeah,
it was stupid.
Yeah, this is kind of like the Varg effect. I don't like the guy, but I respect what it did for the genre.
Yes,
that's about it.
That's pretty much, yeah, Seth Putnam is the Varg of Grind. Was the Varg of Grind. But yeah. But now on to honorable mentions. I will start this one off. Or actually, no, Raphael, do you have any honorable mentions?
Yes, I only have 3.
Okay.
I have Napalm Death from Enslavement to Obliteration.
Obliteration.
Pig Destroyer Prowler in the Yard. And number 3, Repulsion Horrified.
Okay. I'm about to flip the table then. Anyways, so I have 6 honorable mentions. First, the band I was about to mention that Dave Whitty played for before Municipal Waste, Discordance Axis, The Inalienable Dreamless, which was 2000, and it was a bit more polished grind, and also vocally...
It's on my list. That's on my list.
And also vocally, what Zhang Cheng was doing was taking the influence of, ironically, Seth Putnam with the more high shrill, but you do get some low-end growling vocals at times. But yeah, no bass, which is weird to have no bass guitar in a band, but vocals, guitar, and drums, but yet it worked. It worked.
Bass these days are just like extra instruments.
I'd still argue bass guitar is still very important, but but still. But yeah, Discordance Axis, The Inalienable Dreamless, which was actually their final album in 2000 before they broke up. Next up, a modern grind classic, Insect Warfare's World Extermination. Arguably the heaviest album on the list. Like, it is so raw, it's so heavy, and so brutal sounding. And of course, the speed. Like, they really wanted to go the extra length in terms of speed, but also write some heavy fucking riffs within a rather basic genre of music. Next up, an important early contributor, even though they were also a contributor to the early days of the crust punk genre, Damage 381 by Extreme Noise Terror. I picked this one because this one you had Barney Greenway from Napalm Death on vocals, because this was during a weird period in Napalm Death's history where Barney left the band after the Diatribes album and did this Extreme Noise Terror album, but just did this album, didn't join in the band. And ironically enough, the former co-lead vocalist of ENT, Phil Vane, was in Napalm Death at this point, but the band thought he doesn't have the energy of Barney, so they called up Barney to reconcile, and Barney joined on the condition that you write better music. And they did. But Damage 381 gets the title because the title track, 381 beats per minute, playing mega fucking fast. Like, I don't know how a human can play that fast without just speeding it up a little bit. Like,
yeah, you know what? You know what? You know what's that called? Zombie dust.
Zombie dust. Zombie dust.
But next up, early gore grind classic, Ultimo Mondo Cannibale by Impetigo. Chicago band that were gore grind, then eventually became death grind on their second album, Horror of the Zombies. but I picked Ultimo because it was way more raw, way more like a train about to fall out of the tracks a little bit, but somehow stays on. And plus, they were an early influence on the whole horror movie samples at the start of songs. And these guys were hugely influential to a band like Mortician in terms of doing horror movie samples in their songs. And also, you get like 3 different voices from the singer Steve-O, where he does the super high shrilling screams, and then like that like mid-range growling, and then the pitch shifted super low voice to add to the chaotic nature of this album. Of course, lyrically, it's very gory and very cartoony, but it's fun. And also, the album cover's really cool too. Next up.
Yeah, that's the one thing about Grindcore. They get really creative with the album covers.
Oh yeah. They get more creative than slam bands, which I'm assuming that's
way more. It doesn't take much to be more creative than slam bands.
Yeah.
But next up, late 80s contributor to what eventually became Death Grind, Impulse to Destroy by Blood. They were a very short-lived band. They're a German band, but they wanted to take the influence of the early grind scene and the early death metal scene and mash it together into a raw package. And from what I hear, they're really good live, if you ever see them live. But yeah, Impulse to Destroy. And also the album cover, as Gonilok said in his bastardized history of grindcore, a fitting tribute to the Kingdom Hearts franchise. And then my final honorable mention, it's an EP, but it's an influential EP. Necrology by General Surgery. Early in the gore grind, it's still very death metal oriented, but it's early in the gore grind genre. And to me, this is what would happen if you took Entombed and mixed it with the first album of Carcass. Because the tone, it sounds very much like Entombed, but musically it's very much on par with early Carcass. And also this EP featured Matty Karki from Dismember on vocals and bass. And it's a very damn good EP. It's short, but it's a damn good EP. The song Crimson Concerto is one of the best grind songs of all time, I'll say that. With an underrated solo, too. But now on to the top 10.
Now I grindy of the grindy.
So I had to think on some of these in terms of placement, but here we go. Number 10, I bet you Ricky's gonna have this band in the list. Maybe not this album, but this band. Raza Odiata by Brujeria.
I do have Brujeria, not that album though.
Yeah, I went with the first album because to me the first album
that's their second album.
Oh.
Raza Odiata is their second album.
Oh. But yeah, like it's but yeah, it's interesting the story of this band. It was a project from Dino Cazares of Fear Factory with Billy Gould of Faith No More of all bands. And Shane Embry of Napalm Death, and they come together with a couple of their Mexican buddies who were big into metal, and this band comes about, and they all wear like bandana masks and stuff like that, looking like gangsters, singing about drugs and the occult and Satanism
and the cartel.
The cartel going absolutely nuts, and the lyrics all in Spanish. And this band has had many big-time members come and go in their history, like Jeff Walker of Carcass, Daniel and Adrian Erlandson from, respectively, Arch Enemy and At the Gates. Even Nick Barker at one point. Just so many people have been in this band, but the early period where you had Billy, Dino, and Shane together, they created death grind magic back in the day, and that this album certainly proves that.
Yeah.
Number 9, going a bit death. Going a bit death grind with my number 9 pick, The Killing Gods by Misery Index. Because I wanted to showcase Misery Index because they're, I think, a very underrated death grind band. Nowadays, they are leaning more closer to death metal now, but this album was like the perfect mix of death metal production and songwriting with the lyrical and aesthetics of grind. And also, this was the project of Jason Netherton, formerly of Dying Fetus. After he left Dying Fetus in 2001, he formed Misery Index, and they've been killing it ever since they formed. They really have been going strong since they formed. And The Killing Gods, I think, is the best Misery Index album. I mean, songs like Your Faust, just catchy as all hell. Like, they're also catchy songwriters, too. And Jason Netherton's vocals on here are very different than what you heard him in Dying Fetus. In Dying Fetus, you would hear him do, like, the black metal screaming vocals. Here, you get him sounding closer to, like, a Bill Steer from Carcass. Like that mid-ranged growl that occasionally gets low. Number 8 is an album Raphael had in his honorable mentions, Pig Destroyer, Prowler in the Yard. Again, another baseless album. I might quit, but still, and it's also a weird concept album too. Like, Grindcore is not known for concept albums, but here it's a concept album about a deranged man pursuing a woman, prowling her around. And out of all the albums on this list, this one might be the most psychotic, the most deranged out of them all. And also, and it's crazy to think that the founder of this band, Scott Hull, this was actually a side project from the band Agoraphobic Nosebleed. But yet, I think Pig Destroyer blows Agoraphobic Nosebleed completely out of the water in terms of musicianship. And it's funny, the vocalist, I forget his name off the top of my head. I seen a live clip of him one time, broke his mic, so he just had to do the rest of the show with no mic, just screaming at the crowd at the top of his lungs because his mic broke. But yeah, Prowler in the Yard by Pig Destroyer, my number 8. Number 7, another short-lived band, and short-lived due to tragedy, Human 2.0 by Nasum.
I do have Nasum on the list, not that album.
I don't have.
But yeah, and it's cool. Nasum, they formed all the way back in '92, and this was the band by Anders Jacobson, who was all across the Swedish death metal scene, or Swedish metal scene in general, doing death metal projects, prog, avant-garde projects with Dan Swano, who was good friends with. Then he wanted to do this more grindy approach because they were into Napalm Death and other Terrorizer and bands like that, early Carcass, and wanted to create their own brand of grind that was more Swedish death metal inspired. And Human 2.0 definitely takes the guitar tone of the early death metal bands like Entombed and Dismember, but bring it into the grindcore realm. And I love the dual vocal approach of Mieszko and Anders. Anders doing the death metal vocals, while Mieszko does the higher register stuff, the more punky stuff. And the song that stood out for me on this album the most, Words to Die For. Nice. Fucking heavy, brutal, and yet super catchy. But, of course, the reason why I say that this band ended in tragedy is because Mieszko unfortunately passed away in the tsunami of 2004 when he was on vacation in Thailand. So, tough end to a very good band.
I agree. By the way, the lead singer of Pig Destroyer, his name is J.R. Heights.
I thought it was some like JR or something. Yeah. Number 6.
You mean good old JR?
Oh, Jesus Christ.
Can you imagine JR?
Fuck
Good
God
God Almighty! Good God Almighty!
It's a brutal ass band.
This is making me sick.
As God is my witness, it's broken in half.
What do you think about this jerky? I don't know.
Oh my God.
Someone make that mashup, please.
Oh my Jesus Christ.
Anyway, moving on. It's not pro wrestling time.
Anyways, number six. Another underrated, short-lived band. Anti-Capital by Asak.
Mm-hmm.
So Asak was a band that lasted for 10 years from 88 to 98. They came out of the Florida death metal scene. Basically, one of the pioneers of what became death grind, because they flat out said, we want to take the aesthetics and the brevity of the grindcore bands, but mix it with the songwriting and production values of death metal, because both albums Scott Burns produced. And man, they were heavy, they were brutal, they were fast. But yet, as fast as they were not afraid to slow things down to almost doom territories at times. But yeah, Anti-Capital, only 15 minutes long, but man, does every song on this album pack a serious punch. Like, Civilization Comes, Civilization Goes, Socialized, Crucifixion, all these like very political tunes, and their original vocalist Paul, who was on this album, very death metal driven vocals, because he was not doing the mid-ranged or the high shrills of most grindcore vocalists at the time. He wanted to take it to death metal territories. And that's why we get the subgenre death grind, was partially because of this band. Hell, they were so pervasive, even Chris Barnes did guest vocals on a following EP they did a year later after this album. So, Asak. And also, the band Misery Index took their name from the album Misery Index, which I could have put on here as well, but I wanted to go with Anti-Capital because it was a little more sinister sounding. And I prefer the vocals on it a little bit more than the Misery Index album. Now into the top 5. Now we're going to get into the 5 bands I think most people, even if they're not grindcore experts or fans, should know about these 5 bands I'm about to talk about next. Number 5, Extreme Conditions Demand Extreme Responses by Brutal Truth. Their first output, 1992. It was originally hyped as Dan Lilker's new band because, he had been the original bass player of Anthrax, Nuclear Assault, SOD. Then he decided to go into the grindcore realm and pick up some friends who liked grind like he did and formed Brutal Truth. Now, this was more death grind than straight up grindcore because Kevin Sharp's vocals on here. Yeah, you get the high screams at times, but it's mostly very low in the register. And plus, songwriting on here, I think, was the best songwriting Brutal Truth ever had because they were able to go into longer territories. There's even like an 11-minute song on here, which is unusual for grind. But they were able to make an 11-minute song of pure grind insanity. Of course, songs on here like Acts of Ignorance, Walking Corpse, Time, Denial of Existence, just amazing songs. And this, I need to get this album in my collection because this is a very important album in the American grind scene.
So what's the album again? Brutal Truth what?
Extreme Conditions Demand Extreme Responses.
Okay.
Very long-winded title, I know.
Yeah.
But still, it's an amazing album. And plus, features a 4-second song, and I forget the title of it, but they made a music video of it, which was like this rapid-fire thing.
Collateral Damage.
Collateral Damage, yeah, that was the song. But yeah, Brutal Truth, Extreme Conditions, Demand Extreme Responses at number 5. Now to number 4. And to go back to what I was talking about with Impetigo and General Surgery and a multitude of other gore grind bands that came out, like Early Exhumed, Regurgitate, Last Days of Humanity, Dead Infection, Haemorrhage. None of those bands would have existed if it wasn't for this album I'm about to reveal, and if you just ate or if you have a weak stomach, might want to turn your head on this one. Number 4, Reek of Putrefaction by Carcass.
That's my number 2.
I mean, this album... and I put this at number 4 because I dare challenge any band, whether they're in black metal or in grindcore, to try and record an album that sounds worse than this, even if you tried. Because this album sounds horrible. It's super lo-fi. The lyrics, are very redundant, but they're crazy. And this was really, to me, the only grind album Carcass ever did.
And also the album cover.
Yeah, the album cover, unique. The collage of autopsy pictures, pathology and stuff. And, lyrically, look at the song titles. Genital Grinder, Regurgitation of Giblets, Carbonized Eye Sockets, Vomited Anal Tract, Oxidized Razor Masquerade, Macetator, Burnt to a Crisp, Feast on Dismembered Carnage. Just everything. Gore. Oh yeah, did I mention gore? This album is what created the gore grind genre. 22 songs and roughly 30 minutes. And yeah, this was an early album on Earache in 1988 when this came out.
Yeah, which is now we're going through his albums. Usually Earache had all of these bands on their label.
Good chunk of these bands. Brutal Truth, Extreme Noise Terror, Carcass. So yeah. But yeah, it's with this album, like I said, this was really their only grind album they ever did, because from Symphonies of Sickness onward, death metal, and eventually melodic death metal. But, it's crazy to think that this album single-handedly inspired so many clones to come after.
A lot.
Yeah, it's crazy to think. But, and the backstory with the production on this album, they recorded this album at the same studio Napalm Death Scum was recorded at, Rich Bitch, in December of 87. And they had to make the best out of a bad situation because their producer fucked up the whole thing, so they tried to salvage it themselves and did the best that they could, but ultimately it came out the way it did. Thankfully, they went to Colin Richardson for the next 3 or 4, actually, and they got better and better sound-wise each time. But still, really good album from Carcass, even though, yeah, their only grind album before they went full-on death metal from that point on. Number 3, I actually forgot to grab this one. But for my number 3... without this album, you wouldn't have grindcore. Repulsion Horrified. You're number 1.
Yeah, it's number 1, and it was on my honorable mention.
But yeah, Horrified, the story, of course, we know about with this album. This was originally a demo recorded in 86. And what happened was, and it was one of those pure accidental moments, when they record the demos, the bass tracks got removed, so they had to use a scratch track, and that's where you get the grisly, grindy bass tone that every band wanted to strive for. Death metal and grindcore wanted to strive for. Even black metal, some bands try to go for that grisly, the gristle bass tone that this album had. And, songs like Stench of Burning Death, that opening riff, Napalm Death would later rip that off for their song Deceiver on their live shows, because it was, like a tribute to Repulsion, but other great songs on here like Slaughter of the Innocent, Radiation Sickness, 6 Feet Under, Black Breath, which is the only song on this album that wasn't full of blast beats. It was more of a grooving tune. Maggots in Your Coffin, the title track, Festering Boils. I mean, and to think, and I'll talk about this more in depth when I talk about the next album, but yeah, Repulsion Horrified, without this album, you would not have had the other bands that followed. And, yeah, Horrified. Number 2, some people might be shocked I don't have this album at number 1, but I have it at number 2, Napalm Death Scum. I mean, I could have easily went with From Enslavement to Obliteration, but I went with Scum because I feel Scum was more important. And also the story about the album, where it's 2 different lineups on 2 different sides, and 2 completely different sounds. Like, the A side, which I prefer, was a bit more punky. The B side, a little bit more metal. 2 different lineups. A side, you had Nick Bullen on bass and vocals, Justin Broderick on guitar and vocals on the song Polluted Minds, and later would form Godflesh, pioneering industrial metal, and Mick Harris on drums. And again, to go back to what I was talking about with Pig Destroyer, just absolutely deranged and psychotic sounding. And also the novelty of the song You Suffer being 1 second long, the shortest song in the world.
Right.
You said why? That's my best way to try and say You Suffer But Why super fast.
Yeah.
And they don't even, when they play it live, they don't even announce it. It just happens. Suffer!
Yeah, and then I remember they were like in an interview or some type of show.
They were on a BBC show, and the host was like, "Was that it?" Yeah, basically. How come songs are so short? We like to go sweet and to the point. What were the lyrics in that? You suffer, but why? And then speaking of the vocalists, so that would lead to the second side, featuring a new lineup with Jim Whiteley on bass, Bill Steer from Carcass on guitar, Spooky Lee Dorian on vocals, and Mick Harris being the only constant. So even before this album came out, no original members left. The only original member that was on any of the recordings was Nick Bullen. And then after that A-side was done, fucking left, and Mick Harris basically had to carry it on, and then Shane Embry's carried the band since the Scum tour when he took over on bass. But yeah, as far as like which side I prefer the A-side because it sounds a little better. The B-side's definitely the more psychotic and more unwieldy version. But I like the punky stuff on the A-side a little bit more. Just a little bit more. But yeah, Napalm Death Scum. Yeah, are the songs cohesive? No. Do they make sense? Not particularly.
It's grindcore. It doesn't fucking make sense in the first place.
Yeah. But it's still an important footnote in what eventually became grind. Yeah. But now that leads me to number 1. In my opinion, the greatest grindcore album of all time. I dare anybody challenge to tell me different. Pioneered death grind, and also an all-star lineup. And that album is World Downfall by Terrorizer. 1989 on Earache. And like I said, all-star lineup. Oscar Garcia on vocals. Jesse Pintado on guitar, and would later in the year join Napalm Death for many years. Pete Defeat Sandoval on drums, and David Vincent on bass and backing vocals. This was essentially Morbid Angel and Napalm Death members doing this album. And Scott Burns engineered the album while David Vincent produced it. But I mean, yeah. There you see the man, the myth, the legend, Scott Burns right there. Recorded at More Sound, even though they were an LA band. They went to More Sound to do this. sounds perfect. It sounds super fucking heavy, so fast. And like I said, this leans a little bit more into death metal territory, especially with the production and some of the riffing, and even a bit thrashy too, but it still falls into grind. It's a death grind classic. This is the album that created death grind. Without this, would Napalm Death have become death grind pretty much from Harmony Corruption onward? Probably not. No Asak, no Misery Index. Nobody after this album would have existed without Terrorizer. And yeah, this was at the time a short-lived album before they came back in 2006 and put out a mediocre follow-up, but the last two albums, Hordes of Zombies and Caustic Attacks, have been solid for what they were. And who knows what the band has in store. Even though there are two Terrorizers now. There's Terrorizer with Pete Sandoval and Lee Harrison from Monstrosity, and Terrorizer LA with Oscar, and that's because Oscar and Pete have big personal issues that's still ongoing, I think. And unfortunately, Jesse Bentato passed away in 2006 after a battle with liver disease from his years of drinking. So, may you rest in peace. And Jesse, along with Mick Harris, were the two godfathers, and Scott Carlson, the three godfathers of this music. But yeah, number 1, Terrorizer, World Downfall. Raphael.
Alright, here we go. For number 10, I've chosen Capellan Carnage of
Cephalic Carnage.
Cephalic Carnage, Exploding the Dysfunction.
Going more technical grind.
Mm-hmm.
Number 9, Unseen Terror, Human Error.
Mm.
Yeah, Unseen Terror. Yeah, I forgot about them.
Number 8, Wormrot, Voices.
I forgot about Wormrot.
I forgot Wormrot too.
Number 7, Rotten Sound, Murder Works.
I forgot Rotten Sound too.
Number 6, even though we discussed that the lead singer is a real pain in the ass. Ain't no cunts, everyone should be killed. Yeah. Well, in this case, he should be killed just for talking about his racial stuff. No, I'm not wishing death on it, but just he should really think before he talks.
He's already dead, so.
Yeah. Number 5, Nauseum, Inhale, Exhale.
Mm-hmm.
Number 4, the Red Core Fuse in the Revolving Doors.
I mean, Red Core, I always think of them as deathcore than anything.
Yeah.
Pioneers of deathcore.
That's actually true. And number 3, I did choose Brutal Truth, but it was Need to Control.
Mm-hmm.
And Carcass, which you already mentioned it, Levi. It's Carcass.
Reek of Putrefaction.
Mm-hmm.
And number 1, which there's not enough said about it, Napalm Death.
Scum. Yeah.
Scum. Mm-hmm.
All right, Ricky, the floor is yours.
All right, so this is going to be the same effect I had in the folk metal episode. I know a little bit of grindcore, but
went into it almost completely blind.
Yep, but after this, I'll probably go listen more grindcore and be a bigger fan. So, number 10, I'm going to go over the Extreme Conditions, Demanding Responses by Brutal Truth. First of all, I want to talk about the album cover. Is kind of a weird, kind of like different worlds combined into it's like a collage. Basically getting that from Carcass, Carcass collage and Napalm. But, lyrically, it's very political, but musically, it's so fucking good. I mean, this album's not even, 20, maybe 30 minutes long. They have a fucking 10 minutes song at the very end, which I never thought that Grindcore could produce those kind of songs, knowing that they're fast. Sometimes they understand the lyrics. They actually managed to somehow create a 11-minute song at the very end of the album, which kudos to them. And I could have gone with Need to Control, which, that was my second choice, but I went with their debut. Number 9, Nauseums, Inhale, Exhale. Again, one of those albums that, as I was doing this list, I actually enjoyed the living crap out of it. It's tragic about the lead vocalist that he passed away. I think it was in his mid 30s, early 40s,
mid
30s. Somewhere around there, which is kind of a tragedy. But I mean, my God, this album debuted. I mean, look at the album cover. Back to the album cover, and I have like freaking almost 40 songs. Tell me what other band in the world has an album with 40 fucking songs?
Right.
Not a lot. Not a lot.
Not that many. Not that many.
Not that many. My number 8. The Inalienable Dreamless by Discouraged Axis.
Oh, wow.
I never thought. Oh, fuck me.
You having problems over there?
Come on. Stay there. Stay.
Good boy.
There you go.
The lead singer of Nauseum, he died at the age of 30.
Oh, he was young.
Yeah.
But again, I never thought in the world I would ever hear an album with no bass. Which is kind of weird. But again, the impact this album had in the early 2000s gave bands like Big Destroyer an influence to this album. But oh my God, the album cover is the thing that kind of fucks me up because it's like not even grindcore, it just looks like a landscape.
Looks more like death metal.
Yeah, or something like a symphonic metal band, but very, 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 very good. Number 7, which I'm
I was thinking of Pig Destroyer. Ugh.
Number 7, which is surprisingly we haven't mentioned it or briefly mentioned it. Cattle Decapitation, Monolith of Inhumanity. Now, I know why you didn't choose this album, Levi. I know they're mostly more death grind.
Pretty much more death metal.
Yeah, more
with
death
some
metal.
grind elements, but not quite death grind.
But I remember, I want to say around 2015, when I was getting more into extreme metal, I came across this album. First of all, the album cover of this album, it questions your insanity for what you're about to listen to. But then once you get into an album, you're like, oh, okay, you can get into this. But then, ladies and gentlemen, the one song that fucks up with you in your mind, the one song that, how in the hell did you think they pull it up? Forced Gender Reassignment.
One of the most brutal songs ever written.
And
the music video, too, has been like a big hit for horror fans.
Yeah. And I dare anybody go watch the music video and not feel uncomfortable, not feel...
Or puke.
Because it's that brutal, but yet, who would have thought? I mean, come on, that's iconic.
And whoever forget the way it ends with the fucking guy yelling, "You take it, you piece of shit!"
What's the name of the song again?
Forced Gender Reassignment.
Okay, I'll check it out.
My number 6, I'll go with Pig Destroyer with Terrifier. Thanks to the guys at Thrash of Metal, I can't not think of what's his... I don't know their names yet, but...
Joe, he says, yeah, Terrifier, because it produces better bacon.
Exactly, and I love bacon. You gotta have your pigs, terrified, have that energy to destroy them and get more saucy, delicious bacon. But that digress. The beginning of this album scared the shit out of me with that. I can't do the freaking Grindcore voice, but still, I mean, the album cover was like, oh wow! But still, I mean, great. But I mean, I'm not a big Pick Destroyer fan, but this will be my album of choice because it's fast, heavy, goes everywhere, 20 million miles an hour. Now to the top 5. Brujeria. This was a tough one because I could have gone with any of the albums. I could have gone with Brujerismo. I could have gone with Raza Odiada. But I went with the debut, Matando Güeros. So Brujeria is one of those super. You can kind of say
pretty much say they are a super group.
They're a super group because you got members from Faith No More, from
Fear
Carcass,
Fear Factory, Death, At the Gates, Arch Enemy over the years.
Yeah,
Dimmu Borgir.
Yeah, but I mostly connect to this album, the debut album, because everything that they sing about is true. Especially since I live in a border town, I could just go 30 minutes and I can see the border. You see what they sing there. I see it every day. Especially the album cover with this narco having a fucking head.
Yeah.
which to me was like, man, they got some cojones to put that in the freaking album cover. And one of the first albums from Roadrunner, if I remember correctly, from Roadrunner Records.
Yeah, like 92. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which is an album I finally bought, so it should be here in a couple of weeks, hopefully. Number 4. Technically another super group, Terrorizer, World Downfall. You can buy Morbid Angel and Napalm Death and get this blender of an album that is regarded as one of the best grindcore albums out there. But, I mean, I wish that between Pete and
Oscar
could get their differences to the side and give us more Terrorizer. But hey, a man can dream, but go fucking listen to this album. Just go. Number 3, Carcass, Reek of Putrefaction. Gory, disgusting, just downgrading grindcore to the point that it makes you want to puke, makes you want to fucking take a shit in it. It makes you want to do all kinds of fluid, just throw it at it. This is, to me, the tale of two tales.
And we're not talking sexual fluids either.
I mean, you can.
Like, what have I been eating all these days?
I mean, you can. It's a fluid, but I mean, from the album cover that I mean, what I think it was Jeff who got it from Medical
His
Books
sister.
and just started doing the collage, and I don't know what the hell they were thinking at the time, but talk about an amazing debut. Number 2, yeah, there it is. Number 2, Scum by Napalm Death. This is probably one of the albums that took me the most to get into, not because of the music, but because of the backstory, because this is basically 2 different bands, which is something I've never heard of ever, about 2 different bands recording the same album. I usually like the B-sides, more heavy, more basically metal, but I can enjoy the A-side, which has more punk sound. But talk about one of the albums that in the UK influenced so many UK bands. They're basically the Repulsion of the States in a way, because Napalm, they were one of the first bands with Carcass to influence grindcore. So yeah. And number 1, Repulsion Horrified. And I told Levi this at the beginning before we started recording. If this would have been released in 1986, you can technically say this would have been the first quote-unquote death metal album. This would have been released before Scream Bloody Gore. This would be released around the time around 7 Churches. But we know the backstory. The bass got messed up, and the recording, which was really released until 1989. But talk about influencing the genre, talk about defining the genre, talk about just, without Repulsion, we would never have these bands. To me, Repulsion and Napalm are neck and neck of the most influential grindcore bands. But in terms of albums, Horrified takes the spot. So, my number one, Horrified, Repulsion.
And now I finally remember what I was going to say earlier with Napalm and Repulsion together. It's like when we think about it, like, grindcore toes that line between death metal and hardcore for the most part, with one having an obvious favorite, like, when you look at with Napalm Death, they were coming from a more punk-minded place that just happened to scoop up the heavy influence of death metal, where Repulsion was the other way around. They were coming from a death metal-minded place that scooped up influences of punk. So it was like the reverse effect, which makes those two such a contrast. But now it's time to put together the final top 10. I think the ones that are guaranteed are Carcass, Terrorizer, Napalm, Brutal Truth, and Repulsion.
Okay, so how are we going to do the order? Or you want to go from bottom up? Let's go bottom up.
Yeah, alright, so let's start with the bottom 5. So I think Pig Destroyer should be in there. It doesn't matter which one. I still would say Prowler in the Art because it's just more influential.
Yeah.
And also, it was a concept album, and it was a big album for Relapse Records at the time, too.
So Pig Destroyers, what was
Prowler in the Yard.
Prowler.
I would say Asak should be there.
I mean, Nauseum should definitely be there.
Nauseum. I can go with Inhale, Exhale. I can go with Inhale, Exhale.
Nauseum.
I think that should be like number 6. Nauseum.
Yeah.
Let me just write it down.
And I can go either way with Brujeria. I can go with the first album.
Let's go with the first one, Matando Güeros.
You mean Brujeria?
Yeah.
We are Brujeria, colones. As I said live in 07. Alright, so Nauseum, Pig Destroyer, Brujeria.
Do you want to give it to Cattle Decap or no?
I don't think Cattle should be on there because I don't think of them as grind. I think of them as death metal. They just happen to have some of the grindy blast beats, but that's really it.
Not to do the heavy stuff.
I would say Misery Index should be in there. For a modern band, I think Misery Index should be there.
Yeah, I can give it to them.
And yeah, we can put them at number 10, The Killing Gods.
The Killing Misery Index, Killing Gods.
Alright, so then the final one in the bottom half.
5. You want to give it to...
It looks like it's between Asak or Discordance Axis.
I give it to Discordant Axis.
Yeah, I guess I could go with Discordance Axis, but I put that at like number 9.
Yeah, let me just write it down.
So, Misery Index at 10, Discordance Axis, The Inalienable Dreamless at 9. Then it was...
number 8, Pig Destroyer?
Prowler,
or was it Brujeria?
Brujeria at number 7.
Number 7.
And number 6,
Nauseum, and Pig Destroyer number 8.
Okay. Number 8. So now to figure out the order of the big 5.
Okay.
I would say Brutal Truth should go number 5.
I was gonna say Brutal Truth number 5.
Number 4.
Number 4, I think we could put Carcass at 4.
Carcass.
Yeah, Carcass, Reek of Putrefaction.
Now the big 3 of Terrorizer, Napalm, and Repulsion.
Okay. I'm going to make the argument. I'm still going to say Repulsion number 1. I'm still going to make the argument because without Repulsion, you had not Terrorizer.
Yeah. I think that would be best.
I mean, the only reason I say Terrorizer is just because in terms of like top to bottom quality, it's the best. In terms of songwriting, production, music. I just think World Downfall, it did so much, though. As important as Horrified was, I think World Downfall had just as much impact, especially in creating the death grind genre.
Okay.
And how huge that became. But you know what? Let's put a poll up.
But then again, Scum. Then again, Scum also could be at number one too.
Yeah.
I'll put up a poll.
Yeah.
Which of the three albums should be number one? Which album should be number one?
And put the it's Napalm Death Scum.
Napalm Death Scum. Repulsion.
Horrified. And
Terrorizer World Downfall. Give you guys one. Does not meet. God damn.
Which one?
Hang on.
Is it Napalm Death because of the word death?
No, it was Horrified for some reason. Or Scum. It was Scum. Alright, so it's Napalm Death, Repulsion, or Terrorizer. So far, already a vote going in for Repulsion.
You can go either or with 3 albums, cause
you really could. Oh, it's 50-50 now. Repulsion and Terrorizer.
Oh man.
So far, no votes for Napalm, which is weird.
Which is weird. Oh man. I mean, again, you can make the argument for any of these 3 albums.
You can make the argument. Oh, we got a vote. So we have a 3-way tie now.
Oh fuck me.
And with only I think 15, 10 seconds left.
Oh son of a bitch.
We need a tiebreaker. Quickly. Run fast.
Come on, let's move.
It ended in a tie.
Oh motherfucker.
Okay, who has the biggest high?
Okay, it's because these 3 albums, they're right here in terms of influence. Lyrically, gore,
musically.
You know what? I think this should be the list. The list should be Repulsive, Horrified, Napalm second, and third should be Terrorizer, or it could be Terrorizer.
How about? I got. How about? Oh man. Since we can't do a 3-way tie at number 1.
We can't have that. No. We can't have a 3-way tie number 1.
Say a tiebreaker. Put tiebreaker.
Because if we have a 3-way tie number 1, we have to think of 2 more albums to put on the list.
And I couldn't really go with that. I tell you what. I had Terrorizer at 1. Ricky had Repulsion at 1. Raphael had Napalm at number 1. Rock, paper, fucking scissors, man.
Oh my god. Are you serious?
Elimination style.
Okay.
We have to close our eyes and then...
No, everyone have their hands here. Close your eyes. First time, people. First
1,
time
2,
actually
3,
doing
shoot.
All right.
And whoever loses in this one is out, and it comes down to 2. All right. 1, 2, 3, shoot.
3, shoot.
We all had paper.
I get.
Okay. 1, 2, 3, shoot.
Shoot.
All had rock.
What the fuck? Okay.
1, 2, 3, shoot.
3, shoot.
Ah, Raphael won. Raphael beat us both, so Napalm going to number 1.
Napalm goes to number 1. Okay, let me just.
Okay, well now for number 2, Ricky versus myself.
Wait. This is the first time. What the fuck? This is what happens, people, when these albums are fucking
classic. I know.
All right, between Repulsion
and Terrorizer for number 2. Okay.
All right.
1, 2, 3, shoot.
Shoot.
No, Raphael, you're out. You already won.
You're out. You won. Just between me and
it's between Ricky and I. 1, 2, 3, shoot.
Shoot. No!
I win! Terrorizer to number 2 and Repulsion to 3.
Terrorizer number 2. Repulsion. Oh God.
For a first-time moment, ladies and gentlemen, on the Horsemen podcast, we have to play rock, paper, scissors to settle a debate.
Yeah, because apparently we can't settle with fish because we live in.
And again, you
can make the argument for all three of them. You really could.
Hell, you can even make the argument for Carcass. I bet if Archer was here, he would have gone for Carcass.
Probably would have.
Most likely, yes.
But yeah, that's the final 10. So at number 10, we have Misery Index to Killing Gods. Number 9, we have Discordant Saxons, The Inalienable Dreamless. Number 8, Pig Destroyer, Prowler in the Yard. Number 7, Brujeria,
Matando Güeros.
Number 6, Nasm, Inhale, Exhale. Number 5, Brutal Truth, Extreme Conditions Demand Extreme Responses. Number 4, Carcass, Reek of Putrefaction. Number 3, Repulsion Horrified. Number 2, Terrorizer World Downfall. And number 1, Napalm Death Scum. Wow. Ricky's dead.
I never thought in a million years we'll actually settle a debate on rock, paper, scissors.
I know. But we all made our cases. We all made convincing cases for this shit.
That's true. And plus, we can't settle with fists. We can't settle with arm wrestling because we're in different states.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if we were in the same place, we'd be like, heads or tails.
It would be easy. It would be
easy.
It was like, flip a coin. Heads or tails? Heads. It's tails. Damn it.
You motherfucker, right?
Without the reverse coin that Two-Face normally has, just go. Oh, you're still.
Oh my lord. Ricky's just dying of shame and laughter because of rock, paper, fucking scissors.
Well, at least we know next time if that ever happens again between that time, because there was no way I was gonna have a 3-way tie.
No,
it will be too much.
Mm-hmm.
Because if we would have a 3-way tie, what other albums are we gonna add?
Right, that we could agree on.
I could have said maybe cattle, but again, I'm overruled on cattle.
But yeah, that was something else. Yowie wowie. That's all I can say at this point is yowie fucking wowie. We really just did that.
Yeah, but at least we were able to get the top 10, which I thought we were gonna have a consensus, even though at the very end. That's what we're,
at the very end.
Can you imagine if Lockhorns had that rock, paper, scissors?
Oh god, I mean, that would be hilarious. Like, we can't agree, let's settle it with a game of rock, paper, scissors.
Yeah, Sam will be like, why do I want to play rock, paper, scissors for?
We're grown men, damn it. Like, why are we doing this stupid shit for?
Hey, jackass. Why are you playing rock, paper, scissors?
Wait. Hey, jackasses, why the hell are you playing rock, paper, scissors? Why not just beat the shit out of each other in a barbed wire match like Cactus and I did in FMW? But you won't because you're all a bunch of simple-minded pussies.
Yeah.
We love you, Terry.
Hey, jackass, I did exploding barbed wire when you were still just a stain in your mother's pantyhose.
I fought all the greatest wrestlers there was. I'm pretty sure he fought Hayabusa at one point.
Yeah, I think he did, but
oh god,
yowie wowie.
Yeah.
So basically, Grindcore was the last extreme subgenre of metal, even though we could go even deeper into
subgenres.
Some genres, which we might do eventually, but
yeah, like top 10 mellow death albums, top 10 blackened death albums, top 10 avant-garde black albums, whatever the fuck.
Top 10 Death Doom albums. Oh my god, that's gotta kill me.
Damn.
But regardless, so that was episode 60. A reminder of what's coming next. So the next episode is going to be a very special one. We're going to be interviewing James McBain from Hellripper on this show. So that's going to be fun. Roughly January will be eventually when we get the Jeremy Wagner interview.
Probably.
We wanted to push it back a couple months to celebrate his new media company starting up. As far as in between, well, we got the Album of the Year episode coming up in like early mid-December with the Secret Santa stuff. As far as in between, I'm going to put a poll up on YouTube. If you go to my YouTube channel, ThrashManiac99, and go to the community tab once it's posted, you guys will get to decide what will be the order of the next couple of episodes.
So since we're 5 in the group, I'm gonna say 3 for Han and Archer. For me, I'm gonna go with Gothic metal as being one of the subgenres we can talk about. In terms for Archer, I know he's been wanting to do this episode. He's been wanting to do the metal and pop culture episode discussion. That's another one. And for Hannah, top 10 Agalok songs.
And then I guess if I were to choose something that we should do an episode about, I'd say one of the first like album rankings we can do, Black Sabbath.
Oh god.
All 20 albums. All 20 albums.
Ooh, that's
and you, Raphael, your topic of choice?
I think because so far we did so many, the ones I wanted to do. Let's see. Did we do a punk episode?
No, we haven't done anything punk oriented.
We haven't done anything punk, which is weird. We haven't done punk. We haven't done grunge.
Let's do a top 10 punk or grunge.
We could go with grunge.
Top 10 grunge bands?
Albums?
Or albums.
Yeah, let's go with the albums.
Alright, so top 10 grunge albums. Top 10 gothic metal albums.
And
metal in pop culture debate.
We can do top 10 punk. Why wouldn't we do top 10 punk albums?
Yeah, I'd say punk would be more in depth. So top 10 punk albums instead of grunge. Top 10 Agalok songs. And Black Sabbath album ranking.
That's gonna be a mission.
Yeah, we'd probably be on here for well over 2 hours for that.
Yeah.
I mean, we've done it before. We've done it for 3 hours. So
almost 3 hours, yeah. But the poll is actually up live now on YouTube. For those of you watching on Twitch, there's the link to the poll if you guys want to vote and have your say. But that's going to do it for today's festivities. I will be back on live here on Twitch later in the night for some gaming with some buds. But for the people who are watching on Twitch tonight, right now, we're going to raid Loftbed, who's a German metal guitarist who's playing Dead by Daylight. Check her out. And until next time, horns high, and we'll see you in the next one.